What a week. So much to follow with COVID-19. We've been busy analyzing the numbers to help you better understand just where we are in all of this. Today, we saw the most deaths reported in a single day for the greater Houston area, a total of 16. The highest number to date was 15, and that was back on April 10th. And statewide, when we look at those numbers, we saw the second highest number of deaths reported today at 56. Just yesterday, we set the record with 58 new deaths reported. Now, of course, it is important to remember, as KHOU 11 Investigates found, some counties are taking as much as a week and a half to report deaths from the virus. Now, despite the upward trend in infections and deaths, Governor Greg Abbott points to other trends that he says show a more hopeful outlook. I interviewed him earlier this evening. Governor Abbott, as we close another week, we continue an upward trend of COVID-19 cases in Texas. What are your thoughts about where things stand as of today?
Things are in good shape in Texas. Understand a couple of very important pieces of information. Look at Harris County, for example. The trend in Harris County has been outstanding. You have about a 2% growth rate, which is a very comfortable growth rate. You have no concerns about exceeding hospital capacity or anything like that. And if you look at the trend lines in the state of Texas, what we have achieved is a long multi-week downward trend line in the percent positives of those who are tested. Remember this, in just the last 3 days, there have been 100,000 people tested, and the positive test rate remains very low. A month ago, the positive test rate was more than 10%. Today, it's around 5%.
The state is doing more testing, circling back around to testing, but the FDA warned of false negative from tests by Abbott Labs. Abbott Labs has provided tens of thousands of tests to Texas. Are you concerned about these false negatives? What do you advise Texans to do at this point who've been tested?
So we've been doing what I call double testing to make sure that we have the veracity of the Abbott Labs test. And the double testing that I've seen shows positive results for the Abbott Labs test. And so we will continue to use the Abbott Labs, but we will always continue to evaluate to make sure that it does have a high level of accuracy.
So we're anticipating an announcement from you on Monday. Will that announcement include more businesses or widening the percentage of customers and clients a business can receive, or a combination of both? And what about bars, we have to ask?
We're looking at everything you just mentioned, and that is for businesses already open, considering opening them up more. For businesses that are not open right now, considering allowing them to open. And listen, we've been talking to bars every single day about safe strategies they can use that really alters the way bars work. You know, bars are intended to bring people together at a time when we need to have distancing taking place. The doctors are looking into, we have a team of 4 doctors that evaluate all of these strategies, and we look forward to be making an announcement on Monday.